Welcome to the Grow Your Practice podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Chad Madden, owner of Madden Physical Therapy and Breakthrough. Join me each week as we dive into the best practices, systems, principles, tips, and tricks to help you grow your private practice. Hey everybody, in this episode, we're going to walk through a fairly unique topic, and this is around private practice acquisition. So you're a private practice owner, you have a practice, and you're looking to merge or acquire another practice. The reason that I'm doing this episode is within the last week or two, had another conversation. I'm going to guess in the last quarter, probably have had 3 or 4 of these. So, we're going to talk through the challenges that most practices have in thinking through this. And then I'm going to walk you through an 8-step checklist just so that you make sure that you're, sorry for this term, but you're not paying too much for your whistle, which is an old Poor Richard's Almanac. It's 200 plus years old. I don't expect you to know that, but it's a Ben Franklin type saying that he wrote in this almanac. Anyhow, it just means that you're not overpaying for that other practice. So let's get started. I'm going to share some stories in here and walk you through the 8 steps. In the show notes here, you can download the checklist yourself. If you are considering buying a practice, this is designed to help you. By the way, I don't do anything with, I actually do. So the disclaimer is I'm a private practice owner and I have had conversations around acquiring practices. So I'll just leave it at that. But that's not the intention. The intention is to help you on your journey buy a practice. And this is really just to help you avoid the pitfalls and the challenges that typically come with this. So one is you want to get very clear on what their transition planning is. And I've heard this one too many times, but somebody's been in practice for 20 or 30 years. And now what they're looking to do is exit, and you are their retirement plan. So that can be okay if they've replaced themselves in the clinic. If they are the vast majority of the treatment being provided today, and you're going to buy this, let's say at a 3 times earnings multiple, which I believe would be a mistake, and they represent, 75% of the treatment being provided today, that's going to be a problem. So you want to ask yourself, you want to know what their plan is. Are they going to stay on and help with the transition? What's their fair market value? What's the pay that they're going to expect? How long are they committed to staying? If we're talking months, that I'm dramatically going to decrease the multiple. And don't worry, I'll give you the formula here later on how to calculate fair market value for the practice. What's their involvement level during the transition? What are they responsible for? You're going to want to establish that. Red flags that I look for. If the owner plans to leave within 30 days, or even I would call it less than 6 months, I'm going to reconsider, especially if they haven't worked themselves out of a job yet. That's rarely enough time for a transition. I remember one conversation I've had in the last 12 months with an owner of a practice that I just had the conversation with the owner. They had approached us and I said, okay, how long are you planning on staying? And he had said, I'll stay for 60 days. And I said, what are you going to do during the 60 days? And he said, train your therapist. And I said, I'm going to struggle to hire a therapist that quick, right? Especially if this is happening today or next week. I don't think that's real. So 60 days doesn't really buy us anything in that situation. It's a high risk if the practice is small and owner dependent. You want to assess the practice dependency on the current owner. What percentage of patients have only ever seen the current owner? And especially if they're leaving quickly, you want to determine that. How involved are they in day-to-day operations? If everything's running through them, the scheduling, the billing, the revenue cycle management, marketing, key relationships with perhaps, referral sources or anything like that, you're going to want to factor that in to what you're buying. Step number 2 here on the checklist is true valuation assessment. Do not use revenue for the basis of valuation. I see too many owners doing this as they're selling. And they'll say something like, well, I've heard 3 times revenue is good, right? That's not good, right? Like that. I mean, that's a pipe dream for that owner that's selling. That's not real. I don't see any deals being done. I haven't heard of any deals being done like that in the last 10 years in private practice. And I mean, where my wheelhouse is, private practice PT. So I want, at minimum 12 months, more preferably 3 years, detailed financial records, ideally from the practice's CPA, profit and loss statements. The main thing I'm looking at is their balance sheet, tax returns, should they be available, cash flow statements. You want to see what's happening with the money in the practice. You want to calculate an actual EBITDA, which is EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So don't accept revenue-based valuations. That model is ancient and nobody uses it anymore. Most small practices, they overvalue based on gross revenue, and they perceive, without writing down, that there's a lot of expenses to back out. And they'll say, I'm running my car lease through here, and I'm paying my kids' private school tuition through here, and all these other things, for the country club. That all goes away. You want to see that, right? Like, don't allow, I wouldn't accept an Excel spreadsheet or the owner's QuickBooks to be a guide for financial. I want this to be in CPA accounting format as acceptable. If we look at the formula for valuation, it's EBITDA, that number we just went over, which is essentially earnings or profitability, times a multiple equals the practice value. So let's say, as an example, a private practice is generating $500,000 a year in revenue. They have 2 full-time clinicians. The cost to generate that $500,000 is $400,000 a year, and that's assuming a fair market value for both of the clinicians in terms of employment compensation. So $500K in revenue, cost us $400K, still not bad in terms of margin. That's $100,000. That practice might have a multiple of 3. I mean, if I were talking with that practice, that's what I would be looking at. And I would assume that owner is going to stay on for at least 3 years, right? So I'm willing to pay 3 times the amount of money that you're earning in a year for your practice. You get the cash today. I take on the risk in this example, our hypothetical example. And now, so the practice value is $300,000. 3 times 100K is $300,000. So the seller gets the $300K. I get the practice, and that's typically how it works. Now, as a practice scales in size, you can start pushing higher multiples, right? So there is some gain. There's some advantage to being bigger. My deal is public. So in April of 2022, we sold a portion of our practice to USPH. They are a partner. Again, this is all public knowledge. I'm not sharing any secrets or violating any NDAs here. And our multiple was a 9 at the time. So again, all publicly shared information. But at the time we were doing, I think, 1.8 million in EBITDA. Just that's how you calculate the value of a practice. Then you want to compare the asking price to the calculated value. Does the seller have realistic expectations, or are they just, I need $300,000 to retire, and you're my answer to that, even though my practice is only worth $180,000, right? Like I want to go in and have that conversation and make sure that reality, what I'm really getting, that certainty of future income is what I'm buying, that it's aligning with the narrative that I'm hearing from the seller. And if there's a significant difference, I want to know what that is. Frequently, I've seen owners that have a very big gap between what they want to walk away with and what their practice is actually worth. Then they'll start throwing in, well, we have this equipment. And usually what they'll do is they'll use like retail pricing on the equipment. So we have another $100,000 in equipment. Well, that was what you paid for it 10 years ago. That's not what it's worth today, right? So that's what I'm thinking in my head, and I'm going to go through and make sure that, again, that I'm not overpaying for used equipment that likely needs replaced and has been fully depreciated and amortized and, everything else. Step number 3 is once the vitals look right and the narrative makes sense, then we'll do a due diligence dive. This takes some time, and you have to be prepared that if you are going to an owner who has, been treating 40, 50 hours a week for decades, and they're selling their practice, that this is going to be a struggle for them to go through, right? So it's something to think about. You want to verify everything before you commit. Like, don't just agree on a price and then write a check. That very rarely works. So, we call in the experts here. You want to do basically verify everything that they're claiming financially, make sure it makes sense. Legal compliance check is a very big deal. One of the things that you can get yourself into trouble with as an acquirer, if that previous owner was doing anything that was out of compliance, now not only are you getting the assets and revenue generation of their business, you're also assuming a lot of legal responsibility. You want to make sure you're protected there. We'll talk about how to do that here in a little bit. And then you want to, assess what's going on in their operations. Do their clinicians have non-compete clauses, or, do the staff have any sort of contracts or commitments? You want to understand exactly what it is that you're walking into. What are the lease terms and obligations? Does the owner own the building and they have some wild rent that is way under or way over fair market value? And is there an adjustment that needs to be there? Do they have, vendor contracts and ongoing commitments? They bought, again, $100,000 piece of treatment equipment that you're on the hook for the next 4 years. I would want to know that. Step number 4, patient referral source analysis. You want to identify your risk there. The more diversified a practice is with where their new patients are coming from, the more control they have over that, the more valuable that is, right? Again, if our single site, two practice or hypothetical practice with 2 clinicians, and one of them's the owner, if they're getting 80% of their referrals from the doctor down the street, who happens to be the owner's brother-in-law, that's an issue for you, right? Especially if that practice owner is going away. You want to know that. You want to know what the referral sources look like. You want to see it in the EMR. More than 50% of a referral source of new patients coming through from a single referral source that's tied to the owner, that is maximum risk for me, right? Like, almost to the point I wouldn't want to do it. The other thing that I want to share is, and I've had this conversation with a couple owners through Breakthrough who now know how to market direct to the consumer. And I've even had this personally happen where I'm talking with an owner who wants to sell their practice, and they basically say, when you come in, I know that you know how to market. So therefore, my practice is worth more because you're going to make more out of my space. That is not true. That is my marketplace advantage. I don't pay somebody else for my marketplace advantage. If you're walking in and you understand how to use your patient list and market direct to the consumer, if you understand how to work with partners who are going to promote your services in the future, if you understand how to market to physicians, if you understand how to ask for a word of mouth referral, if you understand how to do cold traffic marketing to drive direct to consumer patients consistently, that is your marketplace advantage. You don't sell that. You're not buying potential revenue. You're buying existing revenue that has happened in the last 12 months traditionally, right? So just make sure you don't make that mistake. And again, overpay for your marketplace advantage and your competency with marketing. But I want to understand, what their key relationships look like and where they're getting their new patients from. Step 5, equipment and space evaluation. Again, don't overpay for outdated assets like equipment. You want to assess what the space costs. You want to understand the difference between if they have a gross lease or where everything's included, or if they have a triple net lease where they have to pay utilities. You want to understand what you're paying for with your cost and how, with your expenses, and how that's going to compare to what's going on in the market. Step number 6, avoid paying, again, for your own advantages. I just talked about that. I got a little bit ahead of myself. But yeah, don't pay a premium for efficiencies that you'll create. If you're going to be able to, have a more efficient revenue cycle system or whatever it might be, make sure you're not paying for your marketplace advantage, your competencies, your skill set, your unique angle that you're bringing to the table. Step 7 is expert consultation. I will make this very easy. There are two that I've worked with in these situations that are amazing. The first is if you are in private practice physical therapy, Paul Welk sees the largest deal flow of anybody else I know in terms of mergers and acquisitions. We've worked with him on an internal sale, external sale, potential to merge with other practices. Now we're working with Rick at USPH and the rest of the USPH team, but for 2 decades we worked with Paul. He is amazing. He can help you. He is going to, help you create an NDA, help guide the conversation, tell you what pitfalls to look for, just going to keep your I's dotted, T's crossed, right? So call Paul Welk. He's easy to find. Google him or whatever you're going to do. He has an office in Pittsburgh, office in Harrisburg. I would go there. And then likely what he's going to do is recommend you get a fair market value valuation. I believe she's still doing them, but we went with Randy Roush, and we do it for our practice and we do it for the practice that we're acquiring as well. So I would go there, find, this might not be up to date when you're listening to this, but find out who the experts are within your industry and go directly to them, and they're going to help you walk through planning and prevent pitfalls. And by the way, neither one is a broker. If that's what you're looking for, they are not brokers. They're legal, so an attorney, and then also Randy is a expert in practice valuation as well. Step number 8 is final investment decision framework. You want to make sure that the deal framework makes sense. The purchase price, anything that you're doing, you're bringing to the table with what is this going to cost you? What's your potential return? I want to break even when we're buying a practice. My goal is to get our return as quickly to 1 as possible, right? Like if we're paying a 3 to a 5 in multiple, I want to get that back, whatever that investment was, as quickly as possible. Like I don't want to wait 5 years and be flat for 5 years, right? Lots of red flags. The other thing that I want to give you right here is if you're growing and expanding and looking to scale, you should always be weighing your cost to acquire another practice versus if you could pick anywhere on the map in your area that you would want to open, where would you want to do that, right? So I don't want to violate where I want to be and where I want to provide service and have a business location just because somebody's selling their practice, right? So do I really want to be in this town? Is this the right payer mix for me? I want to think through that, especially when I'm doing the marketing assessment. Is there a population here of people who are willing to pay for conservative care for the type of services we're providing? Am I going to be able to sell cash pay services easily? I want to know that. The other thing is, I compare it to my cost to open new, right? And I can remember having a conversation with an owner again, and he was married to his practice, right? Like this is a really big deal to him, and he wants to retire and walk away, and for me to be buying his gold watch. And when I looked at it, I was like, so for what we're getting, I could open up across the street, and this is just brutal business, but it's how you have to be willing to think about this. You don't necessarily have to say it, but I could open this practice, 1,000 square feet, 2,000 square feet, whatever it might be, and it would cost me $150,000 to do, and that is half the cost of what you're charging. And I think I could fill it up faster than what this is. Plus, I get to lay out the space in a way that I want to, and the equipment's going to be new, right? So you want to think through, what are you actually buying here? right? Other red flags, owner, if there's any knee-jerk reaction on sharing detailed financial records and explaining what's in there, that's a red flag to me, right? And you're going to see a lot of crazy stuff, right? I mean, at some point we all did it. Like we mix our personal and business accounts, and we aren't strict with that. I can remember doing that in the very beginning, and then I got it super straight after one lesson learned. Like, understood, past 20 years, very clean. Keep clean financial records. When you're a small solopreneur, it's easy to violate that. As the acquirer, you want to make sure that you're getting an accurate picture financially. A large percentage of new patients or existing patients tied to the owner personally, who's going to be leaving. Owner plans to leave quickly after closing. That's a red flag. Asking price based on something else other than EBITDA times a fair market value multiple. Declining patient volume over the last 2 years. If things are getting tighter, this might sound crazy, but I want to buy excitement. I want somebody who's excited about the services they're providing and they're growing over time. I don't want to catch a falling knife. And I don't think you do either. Or if you are, make sure you're not overpaying for it. Yeah. Don't pay the price of a rapidly expanding and growing business and that type of multiple for a practice that's fallen off a cliff. That's what I'm trying to say. Major equipment needs replaced or has, huge future commitments. Outstanding legal or regulatory issues. Again, Paul Welk can help you here. I am sure if you are listening to this and you're in behavioral health, or you're a chiropractor, or you're in functional medicine, or you're a naturopath or a podiatrist or dentist, there is somebody like Paul Welk in your industry. You want to have a conversation with that person. They're whatever they're charging, $150, $175, $500 an hour, whatever it is well worth it if you're going to splash down, $300,000 to buy another practice. You're going to want that. And again, if my cost to open a de novo across the street are half of what this owner is asking for, I'm really going to struggle to write them a check. I'd rather do it myself. Other success factors, you are buying income certainty, right? So like if we would invest in the stock market, I mean, I would hope that if you are an investor who is investing, your extra earnings into any sort of stock market, and you're not doing index investing, but you're picking individual stocks. I mean, we know from science, there was a really good paper, if you want to be nerdy about this, it's called Alchemy of Multi-Bagger. It was a really good report published this year. It's a scientific paper relative to investing, and it's basically saying buy income certainty. That's what you're doing as an investor. You're buying future revenues, not just equipment, not just space. Make sure you don't confuse the two. If they're using the equipment and space to generate revenue, make sure you're not paying for it twice. Focus on EBITDA-based valuations, not revenue. Plan for 6 to 12 month transition period minimum. If you have to marry up EMRs, if you have to marry up any other system that is different in any way, you're going to want to make sure that you have time to get those changes in, and that it's a realistic expectation. Very few turnkey acquisitions happen, right? Like we have to marry up and get the systems the same. Diversify the referral sources immediately after the acquisition. You want to go in there with a marketing plan. If I'm looking at a practice, that's doing, let's say, 75 visits a week, and they have the capacity to be doing 150, to me, that's, I'm thinking $7,500 a week. How can I, in that case, $350K, $375K a year, right, in margin, that's potentially in there. I'm not going to pay for that. But the second that I do pay for the existing business, I'm thinking, this is my arbitrage. How fast can I generate enough new patients to fill the schedules and fill the space of what I just committed to? I'd estimate 20% above your purchase costs for integration costs. It's just, you're going to have downtime. You're going to have some goofiness happen. I've never seen that not happen. And the other one is get expert guidance. Don't go it alone, right? Like, you can buy a house without inspection and without a realtor. Okay, I get it, but don't. I wouldn't recommend that. And it's especially the same here. It's just too easy to fall in love with somebody's story, think you're doing them a favor, and then you're caught holding the bag years later, or even months later. This episode was not meant to scare you, but it is meant to help you develop a very healthy way to look at acquisitions. And by the way, I've seen hundreds of mergers and acquisitions that go very, very well. I'm just saying it is easy to make a mistake, and I don't want you to make the mistake. I don't want you to have the financial hardship, and I don't want you to have the headache of just not following a very simple checklist. So again, we will put this checklist within the show notes. You can download it, go through it, and go from there. If you have any questions, probably the best way to reach me is, I'm all over social. You can just message me directly, and we'll go from there. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. See you, everybody.